She was my neighbor, a widow with a smile that felt both forbidden and familiar. I never expected one look to change everything. I never thought a simple Saturday afternoon could feel so electric. I was out in the small courtyard behind my apartment, watering the few plants I'd managed to keep alive, when I noticed her. The widow next door. I had seen her before, of course, but today there was something different, something that made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. She was standing by her garden gate, adjusting a sun hat with delicate fingers. The sunlight caught her hair, highlighting subtle waves of dark brown streaked with soft silver. Even from a distance, I could tell she moved with a grace that felt effortless, natural. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet somehow, the way she carried herself drew your attention anyway. Our eyes met for the briefest of moments, and she smiled. Not a polite, passing smile, but one that lingered, warm, knowing, almost mischievous. "I haven't played like this since I was your age," she said lightly, her voice carrying over the gentle hum of the summer afternoon. My stomach flipped. I wasn't sure what she meant, but the tone was playful, teasing, and somehow, inviting. For a second, I froze, caught between curiosity and hesitation. There was a quiet confidence in her stance, the way she rested a hand lightly on her hip while glancing toward me. Her presence was calming, yet it sparked an unfamiliar flutter of anticipation in my chest. The air seemed thicker somehow, scented faintly with the perfume she always wore, a delicate blend of jasmine and something warmer, earthier, like sandalwood. I forced myself to take a step forward, though my heart was racing. I wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge her smile without sounding awkward. But the words got caught somewhere between thought and tongue. Instead, I simply nodded, my own small smile awkward yet sincere. She laughed softly at my hesitation, a sound that was low and musical, wrapping around me like a warm breeze. I realized then that I'd been holding my breath, unconsciously drawn in by her presence. There was something quietly magnetic about her, a subtle energy that made the mundane feel charged with possibility. As she turned back to her garden, I found myself lingering just a little longer, reluctant to retreat to my own small world. I knew, somehow, that this moment, this smile, this fleeting connection, was the start of something I couldn't yet define. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, but it was real, tender, and impossibly captivating. And deep down, I knew my life was about to tilt in directions I had never expected. It started with something ordinary, a simple errand. I was carrying a small box of groceries up the hallway when I almost bumped into her. She was coming out of her apartment, balancing a stack of books with that same effortless poise I had noticed the day before. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the hallway felt suspended in time. "Oh. Watch out there," she said, laughing softly, her tone light and teasing. There was no reproach in her voice, only a warmth that made me smile despite my own embarrassment. I mumbled a quick apology, fumbling with the box in my hands, and she shook her head, her hair falling over her shoulder in a cascade of soft waves. "Here," she said, stepping closer. "Let me help you with that." Her hand brushed mine ever so slightly as she steadied the box. It was such a small contact, barely noticeable, but it sent a tiny, thrilling shock up my arm. I felt aware of every detail, the subtle warmth of her hand, the softness of her skin, and the faint perfume that lingered around her. We moved together, carrying the box into my apartment, and I was struck again by how natural it felt to be near her. She didn't command the space or force her presence, instead, it seemed to envelop me quietly, drawing me in. I realized I was studying her movements, the tilt of her head when she laughed, the ease with which she gestured, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. She had lived, I thought, she carried a depth and confidence that only comes from experience, and yet there was still a playful spark in her. As we set the box down, she teased, "You really don't have your life together, do you?" And I laughed, feeling uncharacteristically exposed yet comfortable in her presence. She leaned casually against the counter, eyes twinkling, and for a moment, it felt like the room had shrunk to just the two of us. I caught myself noticing every detail, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the faint brush of her arm against mine when she reached for a can of tomatoes, the warmth radiating from her proximity. There was an unspoken rhythm forming between us, a silent acknowledgement that these moments, though mundane, felt charged with a subtle, quiet tension. By the time she left, I was acutely aware of her absence. The hallway suddenly felt emptier, quieter, lacking the warmth she brought. Yet I couldn't stop smiling, thinking about the soft, teasing tone of her voice and the way her presence lingered even after she was gone. I knew, somewhere deep down, that these small encounters would mark the beginning of something far more significant than I could yet understand, a connection built slowly, deliberately, and entirely unspoken. It was one of those lazy Sunday mornings when the hallways felt unusually quiet, save for the faint hum of the old building settling. I was carrying a small basket of laundry toward the laundry room when I heard the soft click of her door opening. She appeared in the doorway, holding a watering can, her movements graceful yet effortless, like she'd been choreographing them her whole life. "Hey," she said, her voice gentle but teasing, the kind that makes you want to respond immediately, even if you don't know what to say. "Need a hand with that?" She gestured toward my basket. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how my hands were gripping the edge of the wicker, how the muscles in my arms tensed under her gaze. Sure, thanks," I said, and she stepped closer, her fingers brushing mine lightly as she steadied the basket. That tiny touch, a mere brush, sent a warm jolt through me, a fleeting thrill I wasn't prepared for. The scent of her perfume lingered, soft and inviting, mingling with the faint smell of detergent and sun-warmed concrete. We walked together down the hall, talking about mundane things, the weather, how the laundry machines here never seemed to work right, small complaints and observations that felt natural, effortless. Yet beneath the casual chatter, there was a subtle current, a tension that neither of us acknowledged but both of us felt. Every time our hands brushed as we moved around the machines, or when she leaned in to read the tiny instructions on a sticker, I became hyper-aware of her presence. She laughed when the basket slipped slightly in my grip, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're not very strong, are you?" she teased, though there was no malice in it, just warmth and playfulness. I laughed too, feeling a little self-conscious but also strangely at ease. Her confidence didn't intimidate me, it drew me in, made me want to match her energy, her lightness. For a moment, I caught her glancing at me, and her expression softened, just slightly, as if she were seeing something in me I didn't even know was there. I noticed the subtle tilt of her head, the gentle way she adjusted her hair behind her ear, and the rhythm of her breathing as she moved. Everything about her felt intentional yet unforced. By the time we finished the laundry and parted ways in the hallway, my chest felt light but unsettled. She had gone back to her apartment, leaving only the faint echo of her laughter and the memory of her soft, fleeting touch. I realized, with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, that I was already looking forward to the next encounter, already wondering how she would move, how she would smile, and how these small, ordinary moments were slowly drawing me into her orbit. It started with an unexpected invitation. I had been tending to my small balcony garden when she appeared at the gate, holding a tray with 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might like a break," she said, her smile warm, almost conspiratorial. I hesitated, caught off guard by the gesture, but nodded, letting her step inside. We settled on my balcony, the afternoon sun soft and golden, casting long shadows across the floor. She handed me a cup, her fingers brushing mine as our hands met. It was brief, but enough to send a familiar warmth through me, a subtle spark that made me aware of every inch of her presence. She sank into the chair opposite me, crossing her legs with effortless poise, and I couldn't help noticing the quiet grace in the curve of her shoulders and the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she sipped her tea. We started talking about trivial things at first, the neighborhood, the weather, the small frustrations of daily life. But gradually, the conversation shifted, slipping into quieter, more personal territory. She spoke softly of her late husband, sharing a memory tinged with sadness and fondness. I listened, captivated not just by her words, but by the way she spoke, the slight catch in her voice, the wistful way her eyes glimmered as she looked out over the garden. I found myself opening up as well, telling her things I rarely shared with anyone, small insecurities, moments of self-doubt, the fear of never quite fitting in. She didn't interrupt or offer empty reassurance, she simply listened, nodding gently, her gaze steady, understanding, and patient. It was in that quiet attentiveness that I felt the first true sense of connection, a bond forming not through grand gestures, but through shared vulnerability. At one point, a stray wisp of hair fell across my forehead, and without a word, she reached over and tucked it behind my ear. Her fingers lingered just slightly, the warmth of her touch brushing against my skin. My heart skipped, the subtle intimacy of the moment creating a tension I could neither ignore nor name. It wasn't romantic in a conventional sense, yet it carried a promise, a silent acknowledgement of closeness. The afternoon stretched lazily, filled with small touches and shared laughter, the kind that leaves you feeling lighter yet profoundly aware of the other person. When she finally stood to leave, I realized I was reluctant to let her go. Even in these simple, ordinary moments, she had a way of lingering in my thoughts, of making the air feel charged, as if the space between us held possibilities unspoken but undeniable. By the time the gate closed behind her, I was acutely aware of the emptiness she left in the quiet afternoon. I didn't just miss her presence, I felt it, like a soft ache, a tether pulling me toward the next moment, the next smile, the next fleeting touch that would continue this slow, inevitable pull between us. It was during one of our increasingly frequent encounters that I first became aware of the tension, not in her, but in myself. I had grown used to her presence, the warmth of her laughter, the subtle way her hand occasionally brushed mine. And yet, with every interaction, a quiet unease settled in my chest, a whisper reminding me of the age gap, of her history, of the unspoken rules I felt I should not cross. We were in her apartment that afternoon, arranging a small stack of books she had just brought from the library. She handed me one, her fingers grazing mine ever so lightly. I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of excitement and hesitation bubbling within me. I wanted to pull back, to remind myself that this was just friendly interaction, but part of me resisted. The way she looked at me, warm and patient, seemed to draw me closer, to challenge the boundaries I had set for myself. "I can't believe you actually enjoy reading these old novels," she teased softly, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. Her eyes crinkled at the corners, the same way they always did when she was amused. And yet, beneath the light-heartedness, I sensed a subtle probing, as if she were trying to understand not just what I liked, but who I was, and whether I would let myself be seen fully. I caught myself studying her too, noticing the delicate curve of her wrist, the quiet strength in the line of her shoulders, the way her hair fell across her face in soft waves. I felt an unfamiliar stirring, a mix of admiration and longing, and the guilt that followed it. It wasn't simply attraction, it was the realization that I was drawn to her, perhaps more than I should be, and that acknowledgement made me suddenly self-conscious, hesitant. She noticed it, of course, though she didn't comment directly. Instead, she smiled knowingly, leaving small hints of encouragement in her gestures, the brief brush of her hand when she handed me a pencil, the way her gaze lingered just a fraction too long. Each small action was deliberate yet subtle, teasing me into awareness of the connection building between us. I left her apartment that day with my mind a tangle of emotions. Desire, admiration, curiosity, and guilt warred with one another, leaving me both exhilarated and confused. I realized then that this wasn't just a fleeting attraction, there was depth here, a pull that demanded recognition, even if I wasn't entirely ready to act on it. As I walked down the hallway, the memory of her smile lingered, warm and inviting, and I couldn't help but wonder how long I could resist this quiet, inevitable closeness. The conflict within me was not just about age or circumstance, it was about desire, restraint, and the fragile, delicate threads of trust and intimacy slowly weaving between us. That evening felt different from any before. The sky outside her window was painted in muted shades of gold and rose, the kind of light that softens edges and makes everything feel intimate, even ordinary. I had stopped by to return a book she had lent me, but somehow, as soon as I stepped into her apartment, it felt like time had slowed, wrapping us in a private bubble. She was in the kitchen, stirring a small pot on the stove, the faint aroma of herbs mingling with the warm scent of fresh bread. "You're just in time," she said, glancing over her shoulder, a playful sparkle in her eyes. "I could use a taste tester." Her tone was teasing, but beneath it, there was an unspoken invitation, an openness that made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. We ate together at her small dining table, simple dishes, yet it felt intimate. Conversation flowed easily at first, about food, music, and the ordinary rhythm of our days. But gradually, the words softened, becoming more personal. She spoke of her loneliness since her husband passed, the quiet ache that sometimes surfaced when she was alone. I listened, captivated not only by her words but by the subtle ways she revealed herself, the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes glimmered as she shared her story. I felt a need to share too, so I spoke of my fears and small insecurities, the things I usually kept to myself. She nodded, attentive, without interruption, her gaze steady and understanding. There was a profound comfort in being seen like this, without judgment, where silence could be just as meaningful as words. At one point, she reached across the table, adjusting a loose strand of hair that had fallen across my face. Her fingers lingered briefly, and I felt the warmth of her touch radiate, stirring a quiet thrill in me. It was not a romantic gesture in the usual sense, there was no tension or urgency, but it carried a gentle intimacy that left me acutely aware of her nearness. After dinner, we moved to the living room, settling on the couch with a soft throw between us. She picked a song on her playlist, music that floated lightly through the room, and we sat in comfortable silence. Her shoulder brushed mine, the contact was light, almost accidental, yet it sent an undeniable warmth through me. I noticed the soft rise and fall of her chest, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the evening air, and the way her eyes held a quiet invitation for me to stay close. When the night ended, I left her apartment feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and longing. Her presence lingered in my mind, the warmth of her smile, the gentle brush of her hand, the soft rhythm of her voice. I realized, with a mixture of awe and apprehension, that these evenings together were weaving a delicate tapestry of connection, slow, intimate, and profoundly compelling. And I knew, even then, that this connection was only growing, deepening, and pulling me closer to a world I had never dared to enter before. It was one of those rare evenings when the city outside seemed to pause, leaving only the quiet hum of her apartment as our world. We had been sitting together for hours, ostensibly reading, though neither of us was truly focused on the pages in front of us. Instead, there was a shared awareness, subtle yet undeniable, stretching between us like an invisible thread, pulling tighter with every glance and breath. She leaned back on the sofa, her shoulder brushing mine just slightly. It was accidental, or so it seemed, but the warmth of her touch traveled through me like a quiet shock. I could feel her presence in a way that was both comforting and electrifying, the kind of closeness that makes silence feel loaded, meaningful, and alive. We weren't speaking much. The words didn't matter. I found myself captivated by her, the gentle curve of her jaw as she tilted her head toward the window, the soft rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the quiet gleam in her eyes as she occasionally glanced at me over the rim of her book. Each detail became a point of fixation, a reason for my heart to flutter, and a reminder of the magnetic pull I could no longer ignore. At one point, a low breeze drifted in from the open balcony, ruffling the loose strands of her hair. Without thinking, I reached to tuck them behind her ear, my fingers brushing her skin ever so lightly. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her eyes meet mine, and for a moment, everything else faded, the books, the quiet music, even the city beyond the window. It was just her, just me, and the unspoken tension that hummed between us. There was a pause, a lingering quiet in which our proximity became almost unbearable. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, the subtle scent of her perfume mingling with the faint musk of the evening air, and the way her shoulder pressed closer, ever so slightly, to mine. I realized then that we were speaking volumes without uttering a single word, our bodies, our glances, and our shared silences carrying the weight of emotions we hadn't yet dared to name. The evening stretched on, each moment heavy with unspoken desire, a delicate tension neither of us wanted to shatter but both were acutely aware of. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and frightening all at once. And as I finally stood to leave, I could feel her eyes on me, steady, knowing, and perhaps, just as conflicted as I was. Walking down the quiet hallway to my apartment, I replayed every glance, every touch, every pause. There was no rush, no declaration, just the slow, simmering awareness of something inevitable drawing us closer, one subtle, charged moment at a time. The next evening, I found myself standing outside her door, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy tightening my chest. I had no plan, no words rehearsed, only the quiet hope that we could share a moment, fully, without hesitation. When she opened the door, her smile was the same as it had always been, warm, knowing, and somehow capable of making the world feel smaller, safer, and infinitely more intimate. "Come in," she said, stepping aside, and I followed, my heart thudding in my chest. The apartment was bathed in soft lamplight, casting golden hues over the familiar furniture, the little trinkets, and the carefully arranged plants. It felt like stepping into another world, one where only the two of us existed, where time slowed and every breath mattered. We sat together on the sofa, closer than usual, the quiet of the evening wrapping around us like a soft blanket. There was no need for small talk. We simply existed in the same space, feeling the presence of the other as profoundly as if words could never capture it. I watched her, taking in the gentle curve of her neck, the way her eyes seemed to hold a quiet laughter and understanding all at once, and the warmth radiating from her as she leaned slightly toward me. Then, with a soft, teasing smile, she said, "I haven't played like this since I was your age." Her words were playful, but the undertone was unmistakable, carrying with it the weight of shared vulnerability and unspoken longing. My chest tightened, not from hesitation this time, but from recognition that we had both been feeling the pull, acknowledging it without fear, letting it exist in the quiet intimacy of this moment. I reached out slowly, gently, resting my hand over hers. The warmth of her skin, the subtle pulse beneath her fingers, and the quiet steadiness of her presence enveloped me. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in slightly, resting her cheek lightly against my shoulder. I felt her breath, soft and familiar, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the evening air, and a deep sense of rightness settled over me. For the first time, I let myself simply be with her, no hesitation, no overthinking, just the pure, quiet joy of closeness. Her hand squeezed mine lightly, a reassurance, a promise, a shared acknowledgement of everything we had been building together. The silence between us was no longer charged with tension, it was full, warm, and complete. As the night grew deeper, we stayed wrapped in that quiet intimacy, smiling, laughing softly, letting the world fade away. I realized that what we had was rare and beautiful, a slow-burn connection, built on trust, understanding, and the courage to feel deeply. And in that soft glow, surrounded by the warmth of her presence, I knew we had found something timeless, something worth cherishing, and it had begun with a single, knowing smile. If you enjoyed this slow-burn age gap romance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a heartfelt story. Comment below, which moment in the story made your heart race the most?